Hi, my name is GiBi and welcome to the Chris Chan Iceberg. I'm sure that you are familiar with iceberg images, but in case you're not familiar with the trend, here's how it works. Towards the top, you have things that are generally well known by the public, things that people know, things that are just the tip of the iceberg. And as you go lower and lower, there are things that either less people know, or that are a little more disturbing. You know how this works, You're going to require a general understanding of who Chris Chan is in order to understand this, because I'm not going to explain it. This is really all, it's just for fun. It's all for fun. There is already a Chris Chan Iceberg that was posted on Reddit, but I didn't like that one very much, so I outsourced making a new one to my Discord, and this is what we all came up with. If you want to see somebody tackle the original, then Dylan Thomas already did it over on his channel, so I highly recommend watching that video as well. So starting off, we have Clear Skies. We're going to start with Sonichu. Everyone who knows who Chris Chan is, of course, knows who Sonichu is. It is the electric hedgehog Pokemon that he based his comic book series on. It is Chris's OC, his Sonic the Hedgehog OC, who has electric powers, who married Rose Chu, who is based after Amy Rose, who had terrifying little children, and who had unnatural relations on the comic book page. Sonichu is what most people know Chris Chan for. It's really the reason that he's famous to begin with. It's because he was spreading his own work online. He wanted to be taken as a serious artist. And instead, people became obsessed with his real life because he kept putting his real life into the comic book. Next up, we have the Quickie. So CWC and the Quickie are Christian's initials, Christian Weston Chandler. We'll actually get to other things that first C stands for later. So the Quickie is Quick, Chris's initials, Key, like Wikipedia. So it's the Chris Chan Encyclopedia. It's a website that currently exists, so you can go on it. It has thousands of pages on Chris's life. Basically, people were so interested in the Sonichu comic because of the allure and the mystery behind it that they wanted to learn more about Chris, and as the years passed, people learned more about Chris. Generally, he'll put stuff from his regular life into Sonichu, and it'll be completely unable to be parsed by the general public because it references things that only he knows about his life, and it's only later on that we discover what that chapter in the comic is based on. So for a long time, basically since the beginning of his existence on the internet, people wanted to chronicle him, which has led to Christorians. Christorians are the people who write Christory. They catalog it on things like the Quickie. They also catalog it other places, like YouTube, which brings us on to Geno Samuel. Geno Samuel is definitely the most famous Christorian. He has an ongoing documentary series on YouTube with over 50 parts. It's called the Comprehensive Chris Chan Documentary, and it starts in his early life and goes on and on and on for decades. It's actually not over yet, although we are approaching present day, and it's just one very good resource for learning about Chris's life, and it's something a lot of people find themselves into. People don't want to have to read the Quickie, people don't want to have to look through old Kiwi Farms threads, so they go to Geno Samuel. He makes it very digestible for the public. Next, we have Sonic Sweepstakes. Most people who know about Chris Chan know that when he was a very young kid, he won a sweepstakes to his mall for a Sonic the Hedgehog game. He got $1,000 that he was allowed to spend, and he bought a bunch of Sega games. Love Quest is in reference to Chris's quest to find a lover. He often called himself a virgin with rage because as an autistic individual, he found it very difficult to find relationships when he was a young man. He still does, but we'll tell that story later. So Chris's love quest involved things like holding up an attraction sign, which had things on it like, I am an autistic 24-year-old man who is seeking an 18 to my age-year-old smoke-free white girl to share a future with. And he would just walk around with the sign, and it would also say on it that he didn't want to be approached by married men or black men, and that he wanted girls to approach him because he was autistic and therefore couldn't approach them. He would go to the local mall, and he would have a piece of string with a heart on the end of it, and he would throw it at girls and reel it in like a fishing pole. That's something he learned from anime. It's something that's supposed to attract girls to you. It did not go over well. Technically, the love quest is over. Chris did lose his virginity to a prostitute in 2012, I believe, and he is currently married to fictional characters. Chris Chan is currently married to Mewtwo the Pokemon. Yeah, that's how that story ends. Alright, next we have Medallion. Chris Chan has formed a Sonichu medallion made out of Crayola model magic that he wears around his neck. He's actually had several of these, I believe 3 over the years. The first one he sent off to a troll who he believed to be a girlfriend, and the troll then filmed themselves stabbing it, peeing on it, and setting it on fire, so Chris made a replacement. His medallion broke relatively recently, so he actually went to the store to get it fixed, and that's how he met another group of trolls who currently want him to taser himself. So that's fun. Basically, the medallion is just something that he wears, that he always wears, and that signifies that he is, in fact, the real Chris Chan. And last in this part, we have Quickville. Again, CWC are Chris's initials, and Quickville is the town that he is the mayor of, the fictional town in the Sonichu comics. At one point or another, Quickville has been led by a fictional character named Amber, who was originally Chris's assistant, and it's also been led by Billy Mays and Brendan Fraser. So yeah, it's great. Moving on now to the tip of the iceberg. These are things that almost everybody who knows who Chris Chan is knows about, but they might not know that it's specifically to Chris that this refers to. So, for instance, Blarms, they might know that somebody got really upset of the change in Sonic the Hedgehog's arm color, and that they maced a GameStop employee, but they might not know that that was Chris Chan. Yeah, that did happen. He was arrested. Blue Arms. He has a whole Facebook group about how he wants to change the color of Sonic's arms back. They used to be flesh-colored or tan-colored, and they changed it to blue for Sonic Boom. And he rallied against that really hard. Fake Girlfriends refers to what I was talking about earlier with the medallion, where Chris would very, very often go on dates with girls, or have internet relationships with girls who were actually trolls. One of them convinced him to mail her his medallion, which I've already talked about. One of them convinced him to do blackface. That's great. And most of the time, they just want him to make new Sonichu comics or to make videos and post them on YouTube. A couple of them have leaked sex tapes of him, which is not good. And one of them, who is a 14-year-old boy, got him to shove his Sonichu medallion up his butt. It's great. But he never learned. He never learned. Patty is the name of Chris's childhood dog, who tragically died when he was in his early 20s, and he wrote her into his Sonichu comics. He has a couple pages devoted to her turning into an anthropomorphic dog, going through a portal in his bedroom, and winding up in Quickville. This was the beginning of Chris using Sonichu to cope with death, which is one of the reasons why it's so significant in the story of his life. When his father died, he also wrote into the Sonichu comics that his father was alive and well in Quickville, because his father is half Sonichu. So that's also not good. So many things on this are not good. Chris Chan's life is not good. Liquid Chris is a reference to a troll who started out not actually wanting to troll Chris. He just did a very good Chris Chan impression and uploaded videos of him doing that impression on YouTube. People thought he was so good that he might be a clone of Chris, or Chris might be a clone of him. And so we got Liquid Chris and Solid Chris, which is a reference to the Metal Gear Solid series. Chris did not like that Liquid was stealing his identity, insert Dwight Jim meme. Eventually, Liquid rode off into the sunset, having successfully trolled Chris for a fairly large amount of time. Mary Lee Walsh was the dean of students at the community college that Chris Chan went to. He was called into her office because of his attraction sign and told that soliciting sex on campus was not allowed. She tore up his attraction sign, so he did a Kamehameha at her, like the Kamehameha from Dragon Ball Z, and Chris believes that that magical attack will curse somebody with bad luck. Chris had to undergo mandatory therapy after that if he wanted to return to college, so yeah. Chris didn't like her very much, and so he wrote her as the main villain in Sonichu, as this evil witch, who he later renamed Slawil Ryam, which is Mary Lee Walsh backwards, kind of. And she wants to use her jerk-ops, which are jerk cops, to make sure that nobody can fall in love, because that's what Chris thinks he was the victim of when he was at school. And finally, we have Asperchu. So Chris, as I said earlier, has autism, and he strongly dislikes Asperger's, and that's because he believes that Asperger's takes away from autism awareness and sympathy and stuff like that. He just does not like it. It's not that he dislikes the disease, he dislikes people who have the disease. So some guy named Alec Minson-Leary wrote a parody of Sonichu called Asperchu, where the main characters have Asperger's, and Chris is in the comic and he's not depicted in a very good light, and so Chris very much does not like that comic, and he rallied against the comic, and he wrote an issue of Sonichu where he kills Alec Benson Leary and frees all of the Sonichus from his comic. Yeah, it was a bit of a power fantasy, but I don't know. To this day, he still says that Asperchu isn't canon, and that none of it matters, it wasn't real, even though he wrote it into his own story. Yep. Alright, next we have Just Below the Surface. This is things that if you know who Chris Chen is, you just might not know about these things. So we have the man in the pickle suit. Going back to what I said earlier about fake girlfriends, we have the story of Emily. She was a troll who invited Chris on a date to his mall. He actually invited his father along on the date, and they were eating, and his father did most of the talking, and afterwards, Chris and Emily were walking around the mall talking. He kept trying to hold her hand, and she had to, shove him away, because that's creepy, and she didn't want that. Also, she's a troll, so she didn't want to hold his hand. Anyway, they round a corner, and standing in front of them is a man wearing a pickle suit. And Chris Chan does not like pickles, because Chris Chan is so straight, you guys, that he doesn't like anything that is remotely phallic-shaped. So he hates pickles. And so the man in the pickle suit comes up and steals Emily away from him. The whole thing was a plot done by Emily and her friends to embarrass Chris in public, because she was a troll and the man in the pickle suit was a troll. That's just a very commonly known story about Chris, but maybe not everybody who knows him knows what it is. House fire refers to Chris's house catching on fire. He left an appliance plugged into his bathroom, there was faulty wiring, and the house caught on fire. He was unharmed, his family was unharmed, his pets were unharmed, but it did a lot of damage to his belongings, and they had to live somewhere else for a while the house was rebuilt. Christopher is a reference to Chris's birth name. He was not born Christian Weston Chandler, he was born Christopher Weston Chandler. Apparently his father wanted to name him Christian, but cowered it out. I don't know why. That would make any sort of sense. Anyway, Chris was like 8 years old, and he goes to his local mall, and there's this animatronic bear. So Chris goes up to the bear, and he says that his name is Christopher, and the guy operating the bear mishears and calls him Christian. And so Chris and his father take this as a sign from God that his birth name should have been Christian, and so they change it. Chris then believed that that bear was some sort of deity, and called it God Bear. Blue Spike is a reference to the troll I mentioned earlier who made Chris shove the Sonichu medallion up his butt. He pretended to be a girlfriend for Chris. They were in love for a very long time. He also pretended to be the girlfriend's brother who was evil and kidnapped her, and he did not put on different voices for the two. He would either just talk to Chris on voice calls with a slightly higher pitch voice, and that was the girlfriend, or he would talk in his normal voice, and that was him, the younger brother. So he was talking to Chris in a call, and then he divulged that Chris had been having phone sex with a 14-year-old boy, and he was going to send the footage into Chris Hansen. And nobody likes Blue Spike. Blue Spike is considered one of the worst Chris Chan trolls, especially from the early years, although I think that there are worse people who come up later. Fanta, or Fanta, depending on how you pronounce it, by which I mean if you're correct or not, is a reference to what Chris Chan would do with said Fanta, which is that he believed that men only had a certain amount of sperm in their body, and that eventually they could run out and thus not be able to father children. And so he thought that if he released that sperm, he would lose it. And he thought that if he didn't release the sperm, that it would dissolve and be lost, which kind of happens. It's just that you can still make more. So he would release it into a cup of Fanta and then re-drink it so that he wouldn't lose any. And he called this recycling. And this was featured on multiple radio shows where people were talking about this, and this definitely led to more people being aware of Chris Chan, and it's also disgusting. So that's why it's on the list. First Let's Player. People will often cite Chris as being the first Let's Player, although that's not technically true. In the early 2000s, he sent in a video of himself playing Animal Crossing on the GameCube to Nintendo Power, and they published an article about him. The first Let's Player, I don't know, it's really hard to nail down who that would have been, what that would have been. People used to do Let's Plays over forums in the early internet, and in the 90s there were even like local cable access shows where people would play video games. So no, Chris was not the first Let's Player, but that's a phrase that's very often associated with him. Jacob Sockness is actually not a troll. He is somebody who is unironically in love with Chris Chan. He is a gay autistic man from San Francisco, California, and he is in love with Chris. He's also completely insane. He believes in the occult. He thinks that he is a star child. He thinks that he's the son of an alien emperor. He believes that our planet is going to be wiped out by the war god Jacoba, and that the only way this can be stopped is if him and Chris unite their powers. Jacob was able to convince Chris that he needs him in order to stop this evil war god, and Jacob tried to convince Chris that they had to have sex in order to do this. Jacob's insane. That's why he's on the list. Alright, so even lower on the iceberg, we now have Captain's Logs. So Chris Chan used to put videos on YouTube that he called Captain's Logs, which is a reference to Star Trek, or more likely a reference to Family Guy referencing Star Trek. So this is stuff that Chris would purposefully put out there in the world. So if you follow Chris Chan, you almost certainly know these things because Chris is open about them. So you have Pmert. Chris, for whatever reasons, definitely from some TV show he watched or something, he believes that saying someone's name backwards will take power away from them, and one of Chris's least favorite people on the planet is Donald Trump, so he will always refer to Trump as Pmert, which is Trump backwards. Sony letter is in reference to a competition that Chris was in. It was for Parappa the Rapper, where he had to do a cover of one of the songs from the video game, and the winner of the contest would be flown out to Sony America's headquarters and would be given 2 PlayStation Portables, and Chris lost the contest. Now, Chris really, really wanted to win because he wanted to invite one of his female platonic friends, whose name is Megan, along with him. They would stay together at the hotel, go on this trip together, and he would give her one of the PSPs, and then he believed that she would have sex with him. And he wrote that in his complaint letter to Sony. He wrote a letter to Sony and said, "I can't believe that you made me lose this contest. You didn't pick my entry. Now I'm never going to have sex with Megan." Yeah. So Christine. So we all know that Chris was born Christopher Weston Chandler, changed to Christian Weston Chandler. He actually changed that one more time. He is now a she, and her name is Christine Weston Chandler. In the early 2010s, Chris came out as transgender and now prefers the female pronoun and the name Christine. For various reasons, I don't refer to him as Christine or use female pronouns, but I respect that he wants to be called that, and there are a lot of people who do call him by those names. The Idea Guys were a group of trolls, mostly one troll named Joshua Wise, who made Chris even more delusional than he is. That doesn't make any sense. Basically, they convinced Chris that there is a parallel dimension named Dimension C197, where Sonichu actually takes place in. It's kind of like, imagine multiverse theory, like in Rick and Morty. That's where Chris got the idea from. So the Idea Guys convinced Chris that it was under attack, that they themselves had fictional versions of themselves who lived in the Sonichu dimension, so they could see what was going on there, and they would extort money from Chris to protect that dimension. They stole a lot of money from Chris. They had him do and say things like they had him slap his mother across the face and videotape himself doing it. They got him on video saying that he was a pedophile, and they threatened to release it and if he didn't give them money. They were just very, very bad people. And they convinced Chris that this other universe existed. They convinced Chris that he was a goddess, and theoretically they also might have convinced Chris to become bisexual, although it's unclear if that was just something that he was hiding from himself deep down all along, but he did come out during the time when they had influence over him and say that he was bisexual, so sometimes that's attributed to them. They were thankfully knocked out of power by a group of people on the Kiwi farms who didn't want Chris to be extorted, so the Kiwi farms ended up being the good guys. Yeah. Unclit refers to Chris wanting to be more of a woman, so he actually pierced his taint. He would listen to meditation music, which he believed would change his internal organs and make him a real woman. And he also used a knife and cut open his taint to make a vagina. It didn't work. There are pictures. It's bad. The Teen Truant Squad are a group of, I don't know, trolls, friends, believers, who knows. It's a group of people who went along with what Chris was saying and tried to also extort money out of him, kind of like the Idea Guys. They bought some artwork from Chris, which got them in his good graces. He liked them because they were giving him money, and so he started hanging out with them. And so they then videotaped him doing crazy things, like making out with Mewtwo, his husband, the Pokemon. It wasn't actually Mewtwo, it was Crizel, but that doesn't matter to this story, and I haven't told you who Crizel is yet. They were also doxxed by the Kiwi farms and thus driven out of power, but they were influencing Chris for a long time, and they were bad people. Sega letter. Much like the Sony letter, Chris wrote a letter to Sega, and he was very mad at them for changing the color of Sonic's blarms. And he put glitter in it. It was a glitter bomb. And he said that they would, like, rue the day that they ever changed Sonic's arms, but the glitter didn't explode anywhere because he didn't do it right. So yeah, that was just part of the blarms saga. Alright, privated Twitter. So again, now this is things that Chris would, like, openly talk about, but he doesn't want everybody to know. Maybe it's things that he's a little regretful of, or it's things that not everybody knows. We're getting towards the bottom of the iceberg now. Tara Strong threats. So Tara Strong is a voice actress. She is most famous for voicing Harley Quinn, Timmy Turner, Twilight Sparkle, Raven from Teen Titans, Bubbles from the Powerpuff Girls. She's a very prolific voice actress. And she put out a video about trolling, and Chris said that she didn't know what real trolling was, and he kind of like was mad at her for it because he's been the victim of real trolling. And so she then responded to him saying that he was self-absorbed, and that was extremely funny because this person that Chris looks up to kind of insulted him. So yeah, that's what that's about. Cole Smithy is Chris Chan's half-brother. Both of his parents had previous marriages and had kids from previous marriages. Cole Smithy is his mother's son. He went on to become a famous or infamous film reviewer. He is most widely known as being the person who gave Toy Story 3 a negative review on Rotten Tomatoes, thus dropping its score from a perfect 100. Yeah, people don't like him. And Chris will often write letters to him and send messages saying, please come and take care of Mom, I can't do this because I don't want to. Tom girl, so a tomboy is a girl who acts like a stereotypical boy, so a tom girl is a boy who acts like a stereotypical girl. Before Chris came out as trans, he just considered himself a tom girl. Yeah. Sonic Boom references, so that means that there were two, maybe, times in the Sonic Boom cartoon that they referenced Chris Chan. There's definitely one, possibly two. So the definite one is that they're playing an old retro video game, and Sonic comments that they never should have changed the color of the mascot's legs.
Look what I found at the flea market! Dude, is that Tomatopotamus too?
That's the best one in the entire series! Tomatopotamus never worked in 3D.
Game companies always ruin their beloved franchises.
And they never should have changed the color of Tomatopotamus's legs.
Obvious reference to Chris Chan and him not wanting to change the color of Sonic's arms. The other is that there's an entire episode of Sonic Boom where a character kidnaps Sonic and they reenact Misery, and the character kind of looks like Chris, and so the idea is that this one, super fan who's kidnapping Sonic, even though he's an amalgamation of all Sonic fans who are crazy, is definitely a reference to Chris Chan specifically, although the creators have denied that last one. Shrek Retold, there's a video on YouTube, it's a retelling of Shrek. They get a different creator to jump in, it's either every 6 seconds or every 10 seconds, I don't remember, and they remake the movie 10 seconds at a time, and so 10 seconds of it were covered by Chris Chan. He just did some drawings. She came for quick. Megan, who is Chris's platonic friend, Chris did not want to be platonic with her. I think I already talked about that with the PSP Sony incident. Chris drew an image that he called She Came for Quick, in which he engaged in a sexual activity with her involving his hands. And at one point he was being accused, because again, he's extremely homophobic, of being gay, and so in order to disprove that, he uploaded this drawing that he did of himself and Megan onto the internet, and that was supposed to prove that he was straight. And Megan found it, and she did not like it, and that's what ended their friendship. He cut this up into a bunch of pieces, put it in a bag, and ended up selling it to the Teen Troon Squad. That's actually how he met them. Megan is a Nazi. So Megan apparently has a couple times in leaked emails said that she thinks that historical photos of German soldiers are cute. She also would get Chris, who had disposable income because he didn't have any bills and he's on disability. She would get him to buy her things, including Nazi memorabilia. I don't think many people think that Megan is actually a Nazi, but there's some disturbing things that we have evidence of her saying. Alright, the next layer is secret discourse. Now, this is stuff that Chris doesn't really talk about, or that's just more secretive than the last layer. Dick licking wall. Chris drew... So, Chris is not only married to Mewtwo, the Pokemon, he is also married to Magichan, who is one of his Sonijus. He is married to Sylvana, who is Magic-chan's wife, so I guess she just kind of came as part of a package deal, and Crizel, who I will again talk about later. So Chris drew an image of Magic-chan's penis on his wall in his bedroom and licked it in a video, and then his mother saw it and she was very upset. So that's what that is. Sylvanas secretions. Okay, so Sonichu issue number 8 is extremely sexual. It literally opens with Chris kind of parodying a nature documentary talking about how Sonichus and Rosechus mate. It's great. There's a lot of bad stuff in there. In the unedited version, Chris accidentally has child porn in the issue. So, fantastic. Sylvana was a villain before turning good and marrying Magic-chan, and her vaginal secretions have paralysis powers, and so if she seduces somebody, then she can paralyze them, and that happens in the comic. Crystals and aura. Chris believes not only in the other dimensional merge being real, he thinks that all these fictional characters are real in the other dimension, and magic, he thinks he's a goddess, whatever. He also believes in more normal, I guess, Wiccan stuff, like crystals have magic powers, and living beings have auras that he can see, and astral projection, and things like that. So he has a bunch of crystals embedded on the underside of his Sonichu medallion. He has a bottle of water that he has a quartz crystal inside of, and he thinks that powers up his water and makes him more healthy. I don't know. He just believes in all that crazy nonsense. Female Ricardo. So when Chris was in high school, he took a Spanish class, and as one is to do in a Spanish class, he was given a Spanish name, and that name was Ricardo. But as one is not to do, after Spanish class, when he graduated, when he was in college, and now in his adult life, he will still refer to himself as Ricardo. So he called himself Christian Weston Ricardo Chandler. And despite the fact that he now uses female pronouns and legally changed his name to Christine, he has not changed either of his middle names. So he's still Christine Weston Ricardo Chandler. So this is just referencing the fact that he still goes by the male name Ricardo despite being a female. Psychic headaches. Chris gets a lot of headaches. People have theorized this might be because of his extremely poor diet. He's very overweight. He is not active. It's possible it's a side effect of medicine that he's on, but he gets a lot of migraines and headaches. He thinks that these are psychic messages or that it's a buildup of psychic power within his body, and so he doesn't think it's a problem. He actually sometimes brags about getting heart attacks and feeling electricity through his body, which is bad because he's crazy. Digress is a meme within, not even just the Christian community, it's specifically my community on YouTube. Chris uses the phrase, "but I digress," or just the word digress, a lot in his tweets. He has a very strange way of talking and writing. He uses a lot of unnecessary punctuation and commas and run-on sentences and all that fun stuff. And so he also wants to come off as professional. He kind of writes in a, I don't know, a better term for it than biblical manner. He wants to sound very official. So he uses a lot of big words that he doesn't know how to use. So very often he will go off on tangents and then come back to his main point and say, "but I digress." So much so that on my channel, it has become a drinking game where my viewers will take a shot whenever Chris says digress. And then finally, Crizel. So Crizel is a Rosechew and is one of Chris's wives. She was created specifically by the Idea guys in their attempt to troll Chris. She is underage. I think she's 16. And they only created her and had Chris marry her in order to then use that as blackmail to prove that Chris was a pedophile. But Chris never understood this, and so the blackmail didn't go anywhere. And then the Idea guys were knocked out of power, so it doesn't really matter. So now you just have this random Sonichu OC that Chris didn't even make, who is one of his wives, that's still in the story, even though it was created by the Idea guys as a troll and blackmail. So yeah, she's dumb. Okay, we are now in the depths. These are things that a lot of people don't know. Ooh, spooky. We have stamp collection. So Chris's father, Bob, collected a lot of things. He collected records because he used to be a DJ, not like a club DJ, like on a radio station. Like he just played the next song. And he also collected a lot of stamps. And when he died, he left his stuff to Chris. There's actually a letter we have from Chris's father to Chris where he says that he hopes one day Chris appreciates all the stuff he left him and all the collections he built and all this music from around the world. And then Chris sold his stamp collection for $80 and then bought $90 worth of video games. So that's what he thinks of his father's legacy. Tails Gets Trolled is a web comic that is a parody of Sonic the Hedgehog, and Tails is the main character. It is very similar to Sonichu in that it is poorly drawn, there's a lot of typos in it, it's a poorly told story, it takes in a lot of other third-party characters, it has like the Looney Tunes in it, and at one point Sonichu shows up. It's very likely that it is a parody not only of webcomics, but of Sonichu in particular, keeping in mind that Sonichu is one of the most famous webcomics, but things like the characters getting needlessly violent as it goes on. Like, it starts all nice and friendly, but then they get violent. They start having curses, they start having sex, they start smoking weed. All these things that happened in the Sonichu comics later happened in Tails Gets Trolled, as if it was directly parodying Sonichu. Quickville ovens. So once again, when the idea guys were in power, they convinced Chris to make a camp in Quickville to hold people in, and that camp included large ovens, and Chris did not realize that this was a reference to the Holocaust, and that he was making his hero characters Hitler. SNT vs. Sonichu is a fan fiction. It's about SNT, who is the Sonic OC of a YouTuber named Courtney, and she fights against Sonichu, who is the Sonic OC of Chris Chan. That's basically it. Chris really does not like this fanfiction because it paints him in a bad light, and so he actually wrote his own fanfiction of the fanfiction to give it a better and more correct ending, and so that's why, yeah, it just makes him mad. Riddle. Riddle is in reference to a riddle that Chris posted on Facebook that makes absolutely no sense and is impossible to follow. He wanted his friends to, figure it out, and nobody could, because, again, it makes no sense and is impossible to follow. I will try to do my best. Alright, so this is a picture of the riddle. Question mark, Mark Cuban, Pie, the University of Delaware fighting Blue Hens mascot, a Blu-ray of the movie Twister, some woman from India, the Sphinx, the Great Wall of China, Smurfette, a boat, and then question mark. So you're supposed to solve for question mark. And Chris thought that people would be able to do this, and here's the solution. Okay, so to have this make sense, we're actually going to start with the cake. Okay, so it's a lemon almond cake, and there's a bakery in Delaware that recommends lemons and almond cookies. So Delaware gets you to the University of Delaware and the Blue Hens. Hens live on a farm, and there are farms in Kansas, and in The Wizard of Oz, there's a tornado, which is also a Twister. Twister is on Blu-ray, and you know what else is blue? Water. And water makes ice, and ice goes into drinks that are served at restaurants, and there are some restaurants in India that serve soy and vegetable foods, and people in India worship cows, and people in India who are women wear these kind of clothings, and people in India are kind of the same color as people in Africa, and Egypt is in Africa, and that's where the Sphinx is, and you might think that to get from the Sphinx to the Great Wall of China would just be like, oh, here's the man-made wonders of the world. Nope. The Sphinx is half human and half lion. And lions are cats. There are cat coffee shops in Japan. And Japan is kind of like China. And China has the Great Wall. The Great Wall of China is made of stones and rocks. And rocks is kind of like lava. It's just solid lava, right? And therefore lava is liquid fire, but not really. And fire burned down trees, which are made of logs, and there are log throwing competitions in Scotland, and Scottish people wear kilts, and Smurfette wears a dress, which is like a kilt, kind of. And then you get from Smurfette to this ship, which is specifically the Mayflower, because of Scotland, and then England, and then they took the Mayflower. So then, what's the question mark, and how do you get to Mark Cuban? Well, Mark Cuban was born in Pittsburgh, and the Pittsburgh are known for the baseball team, the Pittsburgh Pirates. So with the ship and the Mark Cuban, the question mark, the answer to this riddle is the Pittsburgh Pirates. Kill me. That is not a joke. It's the best riddle ever. Alright, dimensional merge. So I already told you that Chris believes in another dimension where Sonichu lives, called Dimension C197. He also believes that our dimension is Dimension 1218. He stole that naming convention from Marvel. He thinks that our two dimensions are sister dimensions, and we're going to cross over, and we're going to live on one big Earth with all the fictional characters. And he believes that he has access to this, because all people who write fiction have access to this other dimension. That's where they get their ideas for fictional stories from. But he has the best access because he's a goddess. And so the dimensional merge is going to happen, and he's going to get Sonichu's superpowers, and he's a goddess. A Girl Who Brought Down the World is a book that somebody wrote. It's about how somebody who acts like Chris got into power. They became like king of the world, queen of the world, I guess. And it was bad. And so they sent it to Chris to try to tell Chris that what his actions were bad and that he should not want to get his way because he's not good with power. And Chris read the first couple chapters, compared the main character to Donald Trump, not understanding the irony of himself hating Donald Trump, and then never finished it. That's it. All right, Hidden Depths. Now we have Mystery Doctor. So Chris released a video of a mystery person wearing a mask and a lab coat reading a poem that Chris himself wrote. In the video, this person was supposed to be Chris's son from the future. Chris believes that he will have 2 children when he grows up, and the poem makes no sense, and nobody knows who's in the video, so he's the mystery doctor. Sonichu possession is a reference to 2 times that Chris actually got possessed by his fictional characters. The first was Magi-chan possessing his body for a couple of weeks, and the second is Sonichu possessing his body. Sonichu began possessing Chris's body in early 2020 after the COVID quarantine began, and as of the recording of this video, he is still being possessed by Sonichu. So the day after I recorded this, Chris actually returned to his own body after almost a year of being possessed by Sonichu, so this is no longer the case. So everything that Chris tweets, everything he says on video, everything that he does, he is theoretically actually being done by Sonichu. The real Chris, or Chris's soul, is in C-197 getting magical goddess work done, and his body is just being looked over by Sonichu. So he will refer to himself in the third person, and he also prays to himself. So that's great. Jessica Quinn is the only real girlfriend that Chris has ever had. Granted, it was a girlfriend that he had over Facebook. She is not a troll. She was into Chris. She has a fat fetish. She got a fat fetish chapter written into Sonichu because she told Chris to do it. And they broke up because Chris was using a sock puppet account on Twitter to hit on voice actresses that he liked. The relationship was just doomed from the start. Every copy of Sonichu is personalized. That's a reference. Every Iceberg meme has... every copy of blank is personalized. It's a meme. It goes back to the first image, which was of Super Mario 64, which is the first big one that got popular. Technically, it is true. Whenever Chris prints off a copy of Sonichu and mails it to people, he will always sign it. So yes, every copy of Sonichu is personalized because Chris has his signature on it. Rosechu's penis. Okay, so Rosechu and all the other Sonichus are, in Chris's mind, actually Pokemon. He actually gave them Pokedex numbers. In the early games and in the anime of Pokemon, there were not gender differences between Pokemon, so the males and females look the same. That was until Generation 4 when they gave some Pokemon gender differences. One of those Pokemon is Raichu. A female Raichu will have a heart at the tip of their tail. That's actually not true. Pikachu have hearts at the tips of their tails. Raichus are just flat if they're female. So Rosechu is a half hedgehog, half Raichu. But Chris always drew her tail with a flat end, which now, that used to just be every Raichu, but now that's only the male Raichus, because the female ones have a heart at the end. So instead of Chris just retconning that and saying that his old drawings were wrong because he had no way of knowing that there would eventually be female Raichu, he instead decided to retcon the story in an even worse way and say that during the issues where he drew her with a male tail, that's because she was actually a male. She was biologically male. She had a penis. And it was through magic and stuff that she is now female. Yep, that makes way more sense. A bunch of people got mad at him for this. A bunch of trans people actually got mad at Chris for this. Because Rosechu had never shown aspects of being trans before. So they got offended about this. And Chris has wavered on this back and forth. But currently the canon is that yes, Rosechu was born male. Guard dogs and watchdogs. So that refers to 2 different groups. The guard dogs were a group of Kiwi Farms members led by Noel, who is the owner and operator of the Kiwi Farms, and they protected Chris against people like the Idea Guys. The watchdogs are a different group of Kiwi Farms users who protect Chris now because the guard dogs disbanded. There's some members in common, I'm sure. I don't know. These groups are very mysterious. Nobody really knows who's in them. And the watchdogs protected Chris from people like Jacob Sockness and are currently protecting him from a group called the Praetors, who are the people who want Chris to tase himself. So they're really just down here because they're mysterious and nobody knows what they do or how much influence they really have or who they are, because they're made on kiwi farms, which is anonymous. Leftovers Tonight is I would call it a podcast, but there was only ever one episode. It was a YouTube channel. This guy named Noah met up with Chris a couple times at conventions. He lived near enough to Chris that they could meet in real life a couple times, and he had a podcast episode where he invited Chris and a local musician onto his show, and the whole thing was a joke on the musician. He wanted Chris to be crazy in front of him, say things like, "Oh, I'm Sonichu, and we're going to cross over in the dimensions," and his goal was just to make the musician really uncomfortable. And he streamed this on YouTube. A bunch of people called into the show and said, like, "Hey, man, get out of there while you still can. Chris is crazy." And his channel got deleted from YouTube for violating some policy or another. I don't know. But, yeah. We're now towards the bottom of the picture, like way, way down. Everything is dark here. You can see nothing. We are all the way into C197. And we have Yellow Skin Night Star. So, Chris has not only a Sonichu original character, but also a My Little Pony original character, whose name is Night Star, who also has autism and magical powers, and can also transform into a Sonichu, just like Chris can. And, that pony's name is Night Star. But because Chris's universe and lore is extremely confusing, Night Star can become human, but there's also a fictional human version of Chris who lives in C197 who can become a pony. Because if you go into Equestria, you become a pony, and if you go from Equestria to the real world, you become a human. So, the fictional version of Chris meeting the pony version of Chris, if they're both in Equestria, then they're both unicorns, and if they're both in Quickville, then they're both humans. And so they're identical, and originally Night Star was yellow, but then she turned pink for some reason. Her full name is Christine Knight Weston Star Chandler, I think. It's confusing. It's nonsense. Rose Shoes Stories. So there was an artist who wrote a webcomic series retelling the beginning of Sonichu from Rose Shoes' perspective. The art is actually good. The storytelling is actually good. She stopped doing it halfway through, which is very unfortunate. She ended it on a cliffhanger. And Chris decided that he wanted to make this canon, so he redrew and rewrote this story in his own way and made everything worse. Okay, Traced Penis. Chris drew a comic where he had sex with one of his fake troll girlfriends, and he drew himself, and then he drew an enormous penis coming off of himself, and the idea is that he probably traced it onto a real piece of paper, which is why it's so big. Yeah. Trollsta's Paradise. So Chris has released 2 albums. Not really, though. His band is called Christian and the Hedgehog Boys, and they do kind of like the Weird Al parody thing, but they'll take a real song and they just change the words. Chris mostly changes them to be about Sonichu things. But instead of re-recording the music or singing well, Chris will just play the song in the background and then sing over it, which largely makes him incomprehensible. So Trollsta's Paradise is an album redoing a lot of Chris's songs, but in this guy's own style. It's a very grungy style, so it doesn't keep the original tune whatsoever from the songs that Chris was parodying, but they are, Chris's lyrics. They're Chris's lyrics put to real music. Wet Dream. So Chris joined a Nintendo forum, and he would post videos that he made in, I believe it was Flipnote Studio, including one where he had a wet dream, and he was swimming in this labyrinth that filled with water, and then he met a mermaid, and he had like a massive erection, and he ended up getting banned from the website. But not for that. He got banned because he kept signing his videos with his real name, Christian Weston Chandler, which is giving out personal information, which was against Nintendo's terms of service. Hedgehogs sleep. In real life, hedgehogs will pee where they sleep. I guess it's to cover their scent, or it does something to their health. I don't know. Hedgehogs will sleep in their own urine. So because Chris Chan is half hedgehog, somebody convinced him that he should purposefully pee in his own bed. And so for a long time, he did purposefully pee in his own bed and then sleep in it. Non-linear Quickville. So Chris has released several drawings or maps of Quickville in the Sonichu comics and on Twitter. And he, in this one image, he said that, oh, here's Sonichu's house, 10 miles away, here's the mall. And so people have commented that would just make the city like one long line. It's as if the city, there's just one street going east to west, and everything's either on one side of the street or the other, based on this drawing. And Chris has said that no, that's not the case, and he gets really triggered whenever anyone brings that up. The reason this is so low down on the list is because it's such a small detail in the whole history of Chris Chan that makes him so incredibly upset that it's just insane. And finally, we get to the bottom layer. This is the darkest of the dark. It's called retconned, because Chris kind of wants it retconned out of existence, or it's just so obscure that nobody knows about it, or at least used to. So let's start with Mew Chew. Chris wrote a couple stories, just like written stories, like prose, before he wrote his comic books. And one of them was about the creation of all Pokemon. It's called How Pokemon Came to Be in Their Pokeballs. And it's about Mew Chew, who is the god of all Pokemon. This was written in the 90s, long before Arceus existed. So Chris invented the god of all Pokemon, and that is Mewtwo, and it's unknown whether or not Mewtwo is still canon in Sonichu lore, because he wrote this long before he wrote anything related to Sonichu. I have a full video about this topic where I read the story, so that's somewhere on my channel. I'll link it below. All-Star video. So this was once again a bunch of trolls. They got Chris to leak a sex tape, and it started with him urinating on his bedroom floor off camera, and All-Star's playing, and he sings it, and he's just having sex with Magi-Chan, which really just means he's humping a pillow. So yeah, it's all the way down here because nobody wants to see it. And then finally, we have Rose Chew's other children. So in the same timeline in the Sonichu comics, when there were giant ovens in camps in Quickville, Rose Chew and a couple of other female Sonichus and Rose Chews got kidnapped and sent to this camp for labor. And when they were freed, they found out that the guards of the camp had been raping them, and that they were pregnant, and that they had eggs, because Sonichu lay eggs because they're Pokemon. And so Rose Chew, who's the main female lead of the series, and who's Sonichu's wife, and they have 3 kids together, she laid more eggs, and they had kids. And I think one of her daughters was among them, and so one of her daughters was also raped and had kids. And so that's just like, you know, that's the darkest thing that happened in Sonichu, and Chris just writes it off in this series that he thinks is for children, because he doesn't understand that this was a reference to, like, the Holocaust, and then he was being fed nonsense from the idea guys. So that's the end of the Iceberg. And this was extremely depressing. Thank you for watching. My name is GiBi. You can follow me on Twitter at GiBi_Devin. Please subscribe if you're interested in Chris Chan. I go over a lot more of the stuff he does in the present day. Gino Samuel is going through Chris's history and is trying to finish off the story. Starting at the beginning, going to the present. I kind of started, when I made my videos, I started in the present, and since then I've been pushing on. So I'm kind of keeping people up to date. My main series is a Chris Chan weekly update, so if that's the kind of thing you're interested in, you know, you want the minute details from, you know, every single week, as opposed to a big overarching story that goes into some more broad topics related to Chris, then you would want to subscribe to my channel. Please.